press record, and we will be good to go for our online webinar about online and e-giving. So there we go. So we're going to start with an opening prayer. O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us always thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must give one day, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts, through Jesus Christ our Lord, with who you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
So welcome. So again, my name is Sarah Stonesifer. I work at Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm joined online by Kyle Oliver. Kyle, if you could just give a little wave. And he is up in New York working on his PhD, his doctorate degree at Teachers College at Columbia, and you can find his contact information there. And Kyle is no stranger to the e-formation world. He is my predecessor in this job, and he has gone on to make his footprint in the educational world, and I'm so thrilled that he can come back and join us for events like this.
Me too.
Joining us as well is Carolyn Chilton, and she is at Grace and Holy Trinity in Richmond, Virginia. And we got connected with Carolyn because she is also a contributor on one of our platforms called Building Faith, which is a wonderful resource for formation leaders. So thank you both so much for joining me today. And then, again, I'm just excited to learn with everyone about what sort of our next frontier looks like for online and electronic giving. So starting us off, why are we talking about this?
Okay, well, I think I'm up first. So we've got a couple ideas here about why we should talk about this topic, and one of them, and this is something you may not know, is that charitable giving has actually been going up the last couple of years. After we've had a recovery from before the financial crisis. And so in inflation adjusted dollars and all that, giving is increasing, and giving to religious institutions is the highest of any philanthropic giving category. Of course, there's some caveats to all that. We know that religious affiliation is down. We know that the middle class is still under a lot of pressure, and that's where historically a lot of giving to Episcopal churches has come from. And it's also worth noting from that report, I think, if you go in and look at some of the numbers in that Giving USA report, giving to religious organizations is growing more slowly than giving in other categories. And especially, I sort of wonder, as we continue to grapple with the effects of the election and possible giving priority issues related to that, I wonder how that's going to affect churches in one way or the other. Obviously, we can't know, but it's an interesting time to be thinking about giving in general. Sarah, can I advance these slides, or do you have to do that?
I think I am on it. So
okay. Of course, this is probably not news to anyone on this call, but it's worth reminding ourselves every chance that we get that fundraising is ultimately about more than money. It's about our discipleship, of course, about giving back to God, and it's also a means of sort of rallying people around a common cause. Perhaps you've been part of a really good capital campaign or a really good stewardship campaign. The parish where I serve does this incredible cupcake party on the day when we all hand in pledge cards. And, we're in the back of the church, and there's Prosecco and there's cupcakes, and it really is a celebration. And the theme of the campaign this year, I think, was something like "Rejoice, St. Michael's," and it really felt that way. And so it's worth remembering that that's a part of this story as well, the sort of galvanizing effect of giving and giving well. the last sort of thing of like why we found this to be a useful topic, you know, beyond the sort of just empirical notion that lots of people asked us about it, is that electronic giving is increasingly preferred by folks who are giving. A couple of links here to a study by Vanco, and we should note that they are an electronic payments company, and so, you know, it's always important to consider the source when we're looking at this kind of data. Nevertheless, I think it looks like a pretty reliable study, and it matches up pretty well with some more sort of neutral research that I've seen from the nonprofit world as a whole. And I think it matches our intuitions. Frankly, just that more and more people want to give electronically. I write very, very few checks. I write a rent check, and I write checks to my Spanish teacher, and everything else, including my gift to you know, my pledge to the church, is handled electronically. And I think that's just going to increasingly be the reality. It's certainly the case with younger people, but as you look at this data, increasingly it's the case with older people as well. This point, I think, is really important to keep in mind. We know that attendance patterns are changing in our congregations, and that you know, that there are higher and higher percentages of regular attendees who nevertheless are not with us, you know, sort of 9 Sundays out of 10 or 19 out of 20 or whatever. You know, we're missing lots of pretty regular attendees every week. And so just as we might want to try to stay in touch with them through electronic means in sort of organizational communications and hopefully in faith formation, I think we want to sort of stay in touch, as it were, with their ability to give. And this cash thing, I think, is also a really significant point. That final bullet. I was part of a parish in Washington, D.C. that had a very notable music program, and we were sitting around debriefing after a otherwise very successful, huge sort of flagship Lessons and Carols effort. And we were kind of in shock at the level of the offering. And, you know, we wondered, we talked back and forth quite a bit about should we increase what we post as the suggested donation for this event. And I think that's not a bad idea. But, you know, at one point, several of us around the table said, you know, this is a major urban city, and a lot of people here don't carry cash. You know, so a lot of people might have given by other means if they had the chance to, but they didn't have any cash, and so they could. I have cash more often now in New York City than I ever did in Washington, because there's so much sort of street commerce in New York. But I think that's the exception, and lots of people, again, especially younger people, just aren't carrying cash at all. So we have access, I think, to a fuller range of giving options if we start to offer online payment solutions. I really appreciate this idea of tracking special, you know, doing sort of special kinds of campaigns. We're not going to talk about crowdfunding much in this session, but one of the things that I think has made crowdfunding really successful is the idea of, in certain contexts, is the idea of really being able to rally around a particular cause. You know, people say they want to understand as concretely as they can how the money that they give is going to have an impact. And when it's around a particular project, that can be really powerful. Of course, we know that we need unrestricted giving too, because that's how we keep the lights on and do all those other thoroughly unsexy things. But this idea of doing a campaign and being able to get really specific real-time data about how people are giving, I think that's something that is one of the real bright spots in developing this capacity. So our contention in this session is, you know, yes, there's data. Yes, we can sort of make an argument But we really just think that at this point the question shouldn't be about if we should do e-giving, but what options we'll offer. We can talk a little bit more about fees and stuff later. It's not that there's no downside to e-giving, but at this point we think the time has come. And finally, we think that in a lot of ways that's a matter of hospitality as well. You know, from a theological perspective, we think that meeting people where they are is important. I'm always sort of leery. You know, of course, there are certain ways in which we want church to be out of touch with quote unquote the culture. But anytime there is one of those situations where the church's practice is radically different than the world around us, I think we want to ask that critical question of are we okay with that, or is this an instance where that radical difference is showing us a lack of hospitality or a lack of some other kind of thoughtful engagement. And I think this is one of those. I don't think there's a good theological reason not to offer e-giving, and lots of good reason to offer it.
Now we have some space for any questions or comments that you might have. And again, that'll be available on the right-hand side of your screen in the chat box. And of course, this is the sort of the awkward little time where we have to take a moment while everybody gathers their thoughts and gathers any questions they might have, by offering some, I feel like we have to give ourselves a topic, like coffee talk from Saturday Night Live. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and leave them in the chat box, and we will get to them as soon as they appear. I know for me and for my giving is that the same thing with Kyle, is that I only write checks for my rent. And as I've been out visiting parishes, it's been a complete fluke that I will have happened to have a few dollars to add in to the plate as it's been passed. And I think I should probably thank my lucky stars that that's actually the case, as opposed to me not being able to contribute to the churches that I'm visiting. So Tom says, in the last slide, it said e-giving is hospitality. In my mind, it's back office type stuff. Can we elaborate? Carolyn, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what back office means, but for me, hospitality means creating an environment where people are comfortable and feel welcomed and can participate at a level and in ways that are good for them. And so e-giving offers them that. It offers with a kiosk or on your website or other things that you might have on-site mobile giving. It allows people to give when they're visiting you, when it's convenient for them. And so it's a way of welcoming people and making them feel like you are honoring where they are at that point in their life and how they give.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Tom says back office, accepting accounts receivable offerings as a convenience. So yeah.
I think we're more concerned with the convenience for the people, for people, especially for visitors and for visitors who maybe don't have cash, and allowing them to, as Carolyn said, participate fully, including in the offering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think really being open to all of those possibilities, again, shows a sense of hospitality. Is that it's like, oh, well, if you don't have cash, we will happily accept your PayPal. We will happily accept, all of the other options that you might have, just not in physical money or physical checks. Any other questions? Tom has a question about sort of tools and how to go about it. Tom, I think your question about kiosks will be answered by Carolyn very shortly, and so that way she can share her Richmond church did it. Let me just make sure. Julia, we will get to giving by text as well. And then Brian asks, how does e-giving work into the liturgical act of participating in the offering? That is a great question. I know that in my experience, I've been giving to my churches purely by automatic deduction for years now, and I definitely feel like that sense of awkwardness of when the plate passes around, and week after week, like I'm not handing anything in, and I definitely wish there were some way to say, like, I am supporting the church, I am giving, it's just I don't have anything physically to give. I have seen like some churches where, this is very high tech, of where, they're plastic around the plate. So you can, put in physical money, but then you can also press a button to say that you've given, and sort of just that sort of indicator that you are supporting the mission of the church and supporting those around you. But again, you've just decided to give in other ways.
And you can do low-tech versions of that too. You can have in the back tokens or cards.
Right. Yeah.
I gave electronically.
I gave electronically, yeah. Yeah,
and so that reminds me of sort of like the grocery bag exchange of when you bring in a grocery bag, you can then put your money into the charity of your choice. Good idea. Good idea. Oh, here we go. Bill Campbell says, I'd love to design a collection plate with an Apple Pay chip in it or something like that.
I thought about that too, Bill.
Yeah, like this Square app. That would be interesting. That'd be interesting. I feel like that the ushers wouldn't know how to handle that. We're gonna be like, oh, well, somebody gives in money, somebody else has to grab their wallet, and, choose how much they want to give, all that stuff.
5 years, I think.
You heard it here first. 5 years until Apple Pay comes into churches. Dara says some churches include a small card in the service bulletin. Oh, that's interesting that you can put in the plate that says
that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. I like that it's in the service bulletin. That's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
All right.
Sarah, I don't know if you saw, somebody asked in the Q&A box about whether the slides would be available. I'm assuming that's a yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes. I'm sorry that I didn't include that. Yeah, they'll be available in the video as well as I'll share the link out. So yeah, thank you for asking that. I did not see it. So, all right. So Carolyn is going to share her journey at her Richmond parish about how they came about to their online giving option at Grace and Holy Trinity. So take it away, Carolyn.
Okay, thank you. So Grace and Holy Trinity Church, we are an urban church. In the Episcopal Church, we are considered large. We have about 950 members. Average Sunday attendance is 325, something like that. We have 4 services. And we actually started a little bit further back in the process with this, with taking a look at all of our stewardship program and doing an overall assessment of the entire program. And we did that because when I got here about 6.5 years ago, stewardship was holding its own, but it was not growing. In fact, the first 2 years I was here, it even went down a little bit. That was the first 2 years of the recession, I think. And we didn't have any data about our donors, and we just felt like we were treading water and probably sinking a little bit. So we hired an outside consultant, and she was in the nonprofit or not-for-profit world, and we looked at churches, not just churches, but the nonprofits and not-for-profits, because we believe that the church had something to learn from them. In terms of giving and development. That has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. Colleges and universities probably leading the way in how we give and how often donors are contacted. So we learned a lot from those, not just from churches. So you can change the slide. Some of the things we learned some best practices from lots of kinds of organizations. The most important thing we learned is that stewardship is about relationships. And even when we're talking about e-giving, we're still talking about relationships. It's about setting up a sound structure in your church, and providing different kinds of opportunities to give throughout the year. We run numerous campaigns now, and we offer different ways to give. So that was one of the most important things we learned from the study, was that the people in this church wanted more options. You can advance. So what we also found out is in the church and in nonprofits world is that the trend is away from pledging. And that's particularly true for younger people. And so we need to provide more opportunities for people to give and more ways for them to give. One of the things that we also found that has been very helpful to us is data. We did not have any data when I started here on who pledges and who doesn't, who gives, but people who give but don't pledge. The size of the pledge coupled with the demographic data and the rate of the growth in giving have been very helpful to us and helped convince us that we needed the e-giving. And then again, our members just said, we want more ways to give. We don't carry cash. We don't carry a checkbook. I can't remember to bring those things with me on Sunday morning. I'm lucky to get here with the kids as it is. I need more options. So when we came to consider electronic giving, here are some of the things that we considered here at Grace and Holy Trinity Church. So we first ask ourselves, what kinds of electronic giving are you going to offer? And in what order will you roll them out? We could not roll them all out at the same time. So we had to set some priorities. The first thing we did, and you need to look at, is you need to set up with your bank how you're going to receive the money that is given to you electronically, and how you're going to get reports from your bank. You have to know if you're going to have to make changes to your database, so that we ended up going with a different database provider. You'll have to decide how you're going to handle the bank fees. E-giving is not free. There are fees per transaction, and you will need to decide what you're going to do with those. You need to decide about changes to your website, which I think is very important, that you need to be able to accept electronic payments directly from your website. That's one of the fastest growing areas of electronic giving, is from what they call a branded website. A branded website would be the page of your website that handles giving. So you need to figure out how you can put a Give Now or Pay Now button or something like that on your website. You need to figure out how you're going to address security and privacy concerns. That was the number one question we got when we started doing this, was how secure is it? And then you need to decide how you're going to publicize the changes and how you're going to teach people to use them. And because you don't just want to go, it's on the website now, because people, especially of a certain demographic like mine, may be very confused. And then you need to decide if you're going to have mobile apps. Mm-hmm. And so those are just some of the questions that you need to decide when you're considering electronic giving. Next one. Okay, so this is what we did, but it's really important for you to know that it's not what you have to do. So we started easy. That was going to give us a lot of bang and some good PR, but without a lot of setup on our end. And we started by just encouraging people to use their bank, to set it up themselves with recurring payments. Different banks call it different things. E-payments, e-checks, it's what my husband and I do. Every month the bank sends our pledge payment to the church. It didn't require any setup on our end, but it gave our donors an option. And we also encouraged them to set it up with their bank as a recurring payment, so that they didn't have to think about it. It just would happen, just like, that may be the way many of you, like John and I, pay our bills. It just happens. So that was the first thing we did. Okay, next one. The next thing we did was we set up with our bank to accept credit and debit card payments. That took a little bit longer. We had to have some meetings with the bank, and we had to figure out how that was going to work. What we did do a little bit of negotiating on, we're able to do a little bit of negotiating on fees. And then we had to make changes to our website so that we could add the Give Now, Pay Now button, which would take you, for how it works for us is it takes you into our database. Our database provider is a membership management software. And that...
Carolyn, somebody had a question about that. Can you say a little bit more?
Right, and I saw that Kyle had answered that a little bit. Right, so our database, ours is a database that not only manages our membership, so contact information when you transferred in or were baptized or married and all of that, but it also does all of our financials. And all of our accounting. So it's two pieces. It's a membership and a financial accounting piece. And it offers us e-giving. That was one of the reasons we went with it. So they serve as not only as the portal, but the middleman. So the credit card payment will come into our financial database provider. And then we get a notice of that and then into the bank. And then we get another report on that. So the database is managed by the financial secretary. And I see that David is asking that.
And Carolyn, can I ask a follow-up as well? How much of a pain was it in your case? Because this is a question I get asked a lot. How much of a pain was it for you to change databases? And if you feel comfortable telling us, which one did you change from and to?
We upgraded. We are with Shelby Systems, and we went to their upgrade, which is cloud-based, called Shelby Next. And we did that because of the options of it being cloud-based. We can access it from anywhere, and their accounting and e-payment and all of that. So that's what we're using. And then the third thing we did was we bought a giving kiosk. Our kiosk, which comes through Shelby Next, is a tablet, and it accepts credit and debit card payment to all of our funds. We've put the list of funds in there that you can give to. It takes event registrations, and you can also do your pledging online. You can pay to anything. And then the fourth thing we've done is set up the mobile giving apps that people can put the app on their tablet or phone. It's a Shelby Next, and they can just give straight from their phone. They can access their account, look at how much they owe. They can
That's awesome.
Pay for Sunday breakfast from their phone. They can pay for Sunday breakfast from the giving kiosk. And the kiosk just stays in the parish hall. You can see a picture of it right there. 2 pictures of it. It's very simple. The home screen, which you probably can't read, but it's just got two things that you can choose, either Give Now or event registration. The event registration piece was really important for us because we didn't want it to be seen as just a money machine. We wanted it to be seen as something that made people's access to programs here easier. And so the event registration is very popular.
Carolyn, Tom has a question about how long it took you to get from step 1, which was the e-payments from the bank, to getting the kiosk.
I would say it took about a year.
Okay.
The biggest step was step 2, working with the bank, and then the changes to the website and upgrade of to the new financial system. That was what took the longest. The giving kiosk actually has turned out to be very easy.
Nice.
So if you go to the next step, I can tell you a little more about the kiosk. We named her. We did a publicity campaign because we were very concerned that people were going to see it as an ATM or this machine that was just sucking up more money and that's all we were interested in. And so we gave her a name. We named her Gracie for Grace and Holy Trinity. We used that image of a dove, which most people think is a duck, but whatever. And we did a whole publicity campaign for about 6 weeks before we actually put the kiosk in the parish hall. And it's been a huge success. People refer to her as Gracie. We even call her, where is, the kiosk? They look for her. They say, I need to make a pledge payment. Where's Gracie? They don't ask for the kiosk. We put posters up. We taught the leadership to use it. I took it to a vestry meeting, taught the leadership to use it and got them on board. And then the first month or so when the kiosk was in the parish hall, we always had somebody besides the kiosk who could help you use it and figure it out. We very rarely have to do that anymore. Gracie is portable. She goes to meetings. She was at choir rehearsal last week so that they could all contribute to a Christmas ministry program we have. She gets in the breakfast line. I talk about her like she's real. She's in the breakfast line, and teenagers are paying for their breakfast with, mom and dad's credit card. She is outside the church so that people who don't have cash, especially for special events like a concert that you mentioned, Kyle, that people can exit and use the kiosk to give to support the concert series. So that's the campaign to introduce her and get people to use it. We were really quite amazed at how well that worked. And actually giving her a name made her a little bit less intimidating to people over about 50. In fact, most of the people that use it are probably in their 60s and 70s.
That's great.
Surprise for us.
Such a success.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about what we've done at Grace and Holy Trinity.
It's wonderful. And now we'll get into sort of the nuts and bolts of e-giving, a lot of which Carolyn mentioned in Grace and Holy Trinity's journey into electronic giving.
Sarah,
yeah.
I just need 1 second. I was opening up the ACS website and it froze my computer and had to restart. So I'm on handheld right now. Just give me 1 more second and I'll be back in.
So Julia, Grace, those are Gracie's feet. We even put a tattoo on top of one of her feet because our assistant rector has a tattoo on top of her foot. Everybody's made that connection between Gracie and and our assistant's tattoo. But great. Those are, if you actually see Gracie, she's a puppet of mine. I have a puppet ministry, and she's a puppet. And I actually did some puppet work with her as we were introducing the kiosk too. But people still think she's a duck. That's
so good.
So there are lots of types of giving.
So I think Carolyn actually went through almost all of these. So recurring payment, electronic checks, that was something that you all started with at Grace and Holy Trinity. Auto withdrawal, and then auto pay via credit card. And I think that a lot of these seem to come up in other contexts of if I'm paying for my Google Drive storage, or if I'm paying for my Spotify account, that will auto pay via my credit card, and I'll get a notification that $2 has been charged to my account. So I feel like almost all of these are are definitely commonalities out sort of in the electronic payment world.
One of the other things that drove our electronic giving and our wanting to do it were fundraisers. So I'm sure, like all of your churches, you have fundraisers. You're selling vegetable soup, or you're selling brownies, or whatever you're selling to raise money for a particular project. And those were had become very difficult for us because nobody had cash for the $10 quart of soup. And so people were improvising and, doing all kinds of things to try to figure out how to take, they were using squares and doing all sorts of things to figure out how to take electronic payments. All of that has gone away now that we have the kiosk. The kiosk is just right there, and you can pay for your Brunswick stew or whatever right on the kiosk.
Nice. And we were talking about the fee issue, and one of the things I don't think we've mentioned yet, but I think is important to mention, is a lot of these tools have the potential to greatly speed up your processing of things. When you mentioned the fundraisers thing, almost every week in staff meeting at my church, there is some sort of grousing about the envelope of money that came in for the such and such event, and the person hasn't been able to go through it yet. And if your administrator is spending or whoever is doing the processing is spending a certain amount of time doing that processing, like that's there is an equivalent cost to that, and it might be worth a few credit card swipe fees. So it's worth remembering that you're not just adding fees, that you're potentially getting some value back in excess of the hypothesis that we all share that people will want to give, given that they have more options.
All right, I'm going to continue moving us on because we are rapidly running out of time.
Yeah, I think the good news is a lot of these don't have, there's not a lot to sort of say about them. With the card readers, many of these payment providers now will send you for free or for very little money a little reader that plugs into a smartphone or tablet. You tell them whether it's Apple or Android, and they send it to you. I think we have an Eventbrite reader in the CMT that I think costs us like $8 or something. I mean, totally nominal. And so they'll send you the reader, and you download an app, and you're ready to go. It's pretty simple.
And it is all through those vehicles. So it is through the Square app and through the PayPal app. And so there is sometimes an amount of setup. Like I see coffee there as the picture. So you'd have to enter in, coffee is $5, I think good is $3. So going through and doing that back end.
Smartphone apps we've treated here. Maybe I won't say much about them. Obviously, some of these payment providers offer apps that you can use to pay directly. But let's come back to this one because I think it's related to the text to give. And we can kind of treat them all as one thing. But certainly, like Venmo has become a popular way for people to send each other money easily. So those apps are worth remembering, and your provider may offer a standalone app. Has anybody just holler in the chat window if you have. Has anybody participated in one of these Facebook fundraisers yet? It's a pretty new ability. I just money just the other day. Somebody was raising money for a meal program that gets more expensive during the holidays. The disadvantage is the high fee, higher fee than normal. The advantage is that Facebook always wants you to use Facebook's tools, and so your content will do better in their algorithm. I am quite confident if you're choosing to play ball with the tools that they offer. So trade-offs there, worth investigating, especially if you have a very active Facebook audience, and potentially, there's some crossover potential. Maybe there are lots of folks in your community who like your Facebook page, or who are engaging with your church on Facebook, but don't necessarily otherwise, go to your website or come to your events or whatever. And there might be some potential there. It's worth trying if you're in one of those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I have to say, I love the idea of not sending people to another website or another tab. And the very small safety net that Facebook has, including having the 501c3 status, like that makes me feel a little bit better that they're at least checking, just a little bit. So then that way, we're not getting, duped by fake charity organizations through Facebook. So I appreciate that.
Electronic giving also lets you do things like Giving Tuesday, which were just a couple weeks ago. We tried it for the first time and had not much success with it, but I think it's something that grows. But you do have to have the electronic giving option. Giving Tuesday is a program. It doesn't process your payments for you. But this is another kind of thing that electronic giving allows you to do.
I'd be interested to hear from anyone who's had some experience with it or is motivated to try it. My sense is that it's a very crowded market now. I got at least 10 Giving Tuesday emails, and found that pretty overwhelming. If I'd gotten 2, I might have given to 1 or 2 of them, but I got 10, so I didn't give to any of them.
Right.
Good point. Good point. Special campaign.
I think we covered that.
Okay. And I think we did talk about the giving kiosk, and somebody had a question about it. We were asking about the sort of initial costs, security implementation, and then also account status. Apparently, it's a PCI compliance might be a big issue. Carolyn, do you have any insights into that?
I didn't catch the last part of the comment. The kiosk that we have, I think we purchased it, and it was $1,000, and it came already set up, and I change the funds that are on it and put the event registrations and all of that on it. So we own it, and it was in the neighborhood of $1,000.
Okay. But again, systems vary depending on your database, depending on how you do it. If you do sort of a more DIY setup, it might be a little bit different.
Right. The $1,000 was the tablet and the stand. I mean, that was the whole thing. Mm-hmm. You came and you just plugged it in and off she went.
And then text give.
Yeah, I think this is an intriguing notion. There are a number of payment companies that among the mix of things that they offer is this ability to send a text message to a special code, either to give directly through your credit card or through your phone bill, which I think that pattern is kind of on the way out. And then this new pattern is this notion of you text a code and you get sent a link, and it's a one-page checkout link to give basically on a page that pops up from your phone. So they don't have to go to the website. They don't have to, it's literally, you could be in the middle of the sermon. You can say, and we felt moved to participate in this as a congregation. And if you send a text right now to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever, you can in one page, you can enter name, credit card, expiration date, boom, you gave. So I think that's intriguing. There are some groups that are doing things like that. Kindred and Tithely are both church-oriented ones, so I think they understand our context pretty well. I learned about another one recently called AppPay, which I don't know as much about, but I think that's intriguing. So it's related to, I think at least one of those companies, it's hard to keep track of who offers what. I think at least one of them offers an app as well, but in some ways I think the text-based is sort of even better than an app. And a lot of those will then create in your system a way of keeping track of the payments, possibly giving your people access to their payment history, all that kind of thing. So another good thing to think about as you navigate the various lists of tools that are out there.
Yeah, and just like all of the credit card readers or even your databases, there is, of course, a fee associated with it. So just like with anything. Things to consider, as these are recurring themes that we've mentioned, security and privacy. You all have done a great job of bringing that up. Again, the companies are just skimming off the top. So incorporating that into your calculations, can it easily be added into your website? Or, if your website is integrated with one of these companies and databases, that a possibility? Can people access their account themselves to, again, sort of check on their registrations, check on their giving, sort of not like asking and bugging the treasurer for how much money they still owe? And is it mobile friendly? So
I feel like we should mention just one other just rule of thumb on the fees thing. It seems, my sense, and others can correct me if I'm wrong, my sense is that you should expect to pay somewhere between 2.5% and 3% fees.
Right.
If it's more than that, be mindful. If it's more than that, you should be getting some additional value, either in terms of the administration of those payments, or with Facebook, you're getting sort of preferential treatment in their algorithm, presumably. But don't pay more than 3% per swipe, unless there's other stuff that you're getting for that.
Mm-hmm. And then I know we have some other questions. David asked the panelists what the other initial costs associated with implementing e-giving. And I think it really depends on, which piece you're trying to set up, because if you're merely just doing, bank to, or, electronic checks, that is free and that's no cost to the church. But everything else, the credit card readers you can get for free, through Square, but then, you're paying, what, Kyle, did you say 2.5% to 3% every time you swipe? So to include that on your calculations of saying, well, this is normally, $20. And so because, we're going to be doing it on Scrap, maybe it costs $21 to make sure that you're incorporating that into your calculations. I think I lost some other ones. Somebody had a question about, Bob had a question about people who have problems controlling credit card purchases and possibly overextending the ability to pay off. Any experiences about that? I have not heard about that. I don't know if anybody else has faced those sort of issues in a not-for-profit context.
It was something that I personally struggled with. As we were walking through this process here of that. I decided that for myself anyway, I couldn't control other people, essentially, and I couldn't be responsible for all of that. And I do notice that most people are using debit, not credit cards. So that's I think it's a pastoral issue, though. There's no doubt about that. I agree with it.
I may be able to reach out to Randall Curtis and ask him about this. When we talked about something along these lines on the Easter People podcast years ago, he mentioned a sort of church-based sort of family financial literacy in a faith context kind of program.
Was it Dave Ramsey?
Say it again.
Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace
Yes.
University.
Yep, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And he said, he had some reservations about some of the theology, but that nevertheless he and his wife found it really helpful for thinking through. So there are, in addition to the general stewardship resources, I think there are some sort of faith and personal financial literacy type resources floating around out there. Yeah.
Brian had a question about using website versus a phone app. I'm hearing that apps are becoming obsolete. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, people debate about that. I mean, I think, certainly mobile is not becoming obsolete. But if you can have a good mobily optimized page on your website, that, I'm not sure you need an app.
Yeah,
I think that the app brings to us is that with the mobile app, you can check your account. And you can't do that from the website. You can make a payment or register for an event from the buttons on the website. But with the app, you can check your accounts. If you forgot, if you paid your pledge last month, you can check.
Nice.
And ours is a combination membership financial, so you can actually look up a member's phone number, or you see their address and you can click on the Google Maps, get me directions to Sarah's house.
Nice.
That sort of thing.
Cool.
You have to register as a member, and another security feature for us is that all of those requests come through the database manager here, our financial secretary, and she approves them, so that we know that it's a real person and a real member asking to be a member of this, and it's not a bot or something like that.
Tom McDermott asked, are there limitations to e-giving if your internet connection is slow, both giver and receiver end? Some of these things that we were mentioning, like if people are giving from their phones, and that's on people's 3G network, or they can do it, from their house and give to the church as well, or even text message that doesn't require Wi-Fi. Any other thoughts on that?
The kiosk does require Wi-Fi. So for the kiosk, we were doing in the middle of a parish hall renovation, and we did add Wi-Fi to both levels of this building. So, and that was with the kiosk in mind. So nice. The kiosk does need Wi-Fi.
Nice.
The other thing I'll say is, secure connections take longer, and if you're in an area that's poorly served by 3G or by wired internet, it could be a factor. And there are Episcopal churches in those areas, West Virginia.
A great question.
Other places.
You're right. So thank you all so much for sharing your questions, your thoughts, your stories, your resources. This is a wonderful session, and I greatly appreciate every one of you being here, especially a big thanks to my panelists, Kyle Oliver and Carolyn Chilton. Thank you again. You all are always wonderful sources, founts of information. I learn so much from you every time I get to interact with you all. So coming up from the Center for the Ministry of Teaching, here's all of our contact information again.
And don't hesitate to contact us.
Yes.
Contact me. I'm happy to help.
These wonderful people are so open to emails and responding and being helpful. Obviously they are, since they accepted my invitation to be part of this panel. And again, I'm happy to sort of forward any resources that we talked about as well. You'll be receiving an email in about 48 hours with a recording of this session, as well as a link to the Google Slides. And then also coming up from the Center for the Ministry, our next webinar will be about congregational formation during Lent, and that will be with Krista Lovell and Sue Van Oss, and then also Matthew Kozlowski will be hosting that, and from our Building Faith. That'll be on January 18th at 3 p.m. Then also another shout out, I know some of my friends from South Carolina and Florida already know about this. I will be in the South for some boot camps in January, some e-formation boot camps. So I will be in Florida. I will be in Florida at Dayspring Retreat Center in Southwest Florida as part of their Digital Communications and Digital Media for Ministry Boot Camp. And that's the day after MLK Day. And then I will be over in Columbia, South Carolina on doing an e-formation boot camp for the Upper South Carolina and the Episcopal Church in South Carolina on Saturday, January 21st. And as I say all of that, I will make sure that I will send out links as well. So once again, thank you so much.
Sarah, One
Yes.
more short time horizon thing.
Of
If you're
course.
interested, on January 9th through the 13th, I'll
Yeah.
be teaching a digital media for ministry intensive at Virginia Seminary. So if you have the means to get to Virginia, and places to stay and all that, I realize it can be an expensive proposition, but if you're interested in some continuing ed broadly for this digital media for ministry intensive, one of the 10 sessions of which will cover more of this kind of thing, you can go to vts.edu/LTE, lifetime theological education, and there's a sign up page. There's a sign up page there. It's a really fun course. This will be the third or fourth time we've done it, and hope you consider it if you have the chance.
Awesome. And again, all of this information is also available up on the Center for the Ministry of Teaching website, which you can see on this slide, vts.edu/CMT. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to have us all sign off. Thank you again for joining all of us. And we are your humble servants, Sarah, Carolyn, and Kyle. So information will be sent your way, I promise. Goodbye.
Bye.